Hello, welcome along to this short video where I wanted to show you one of the new features that's just shipped in the new version 3 of Cake. And that feature is the new TaskOf method that you can use when you're creating your Cake tasks. If we go ahead and jump in, what I'm going to show you is an example of how we would do this in an earlier version of Cake, and then I'm going to show you how we would do it in the new version 3 version of Cake. So in this example, I've got a build data class that is used for sharing state between different tasks or different setup or teardown methods that I might have within my Cake script. Now, what is in this build data class doesn't really make any difference. This is just an example of how you can construct a set of shared data that can be consumed in multiple places. So what you would typically do is you would create a new instance of that build data class within a setup method where you configure what the current state of that build data class is. And then in subsequent executions of tasks or setup or teardown methods for individual tasks, you may mutate that data as the build progresses. But what we're doing here is we're just setting up the initial build data class. So we're doing a return new build data, we're setting some information in it, and then we're letting the build continue. Now down here where I've got a build packages task, I'm then using information within that setup build data class object to control whether this build is this task rather is executed at all with the criteria object. And then within the does method of this task, I'm then using again information contained within there to do something. Now, obviously, this is a contrived example where we're actually not doing anything, but the idea there is that you can share information between tasks. Now, depending on the complexity of that task, you might have multiple criteria. Each of those would have had to take a build data as the generic type for that criteria, or you might have multiple does methods on the task, or you might have a DoesForEach. Now, each one of those would have had to take the information about the type that the task is being executed for, in this case, the build data class. And so if I go ahead and run that, so I'm going to go back, I'm going to go over to my PowerShell here, I'm just going to clear this out, and I'm going to do a .NET Cake of my state.cake. So what we'll see here is it's just going to run, and it's going to output some information, and that information is going to be that packages were built, and then it completed and built for. So what this script actually does isn't the important thing. What I'm trying to stress here, though, is that the requirement was that when you created a task that had a shared data context, for every criteria that you added, you would have had to specify the type that's being used. For every does on that task, you would have to specify the type that's being used. Now, what we've introduced in version 3 of Cake is a new TaskOf method. So in this new state method, everything's pretty much exactly the same. So we've still got the build data class where we can configure and mutate data across different executions of tasks. We've got our setup method, which controls the specific creation or setup of that build data instance for the script. But what we've got here instead is a TaskOf method that takes one piece of information, and that's the build data type for the script that we're going to execute. And what you'll see now is that we don't have to specify that on the WithCriteria object, and we don't need to specify that on the does method, and we wouldn't need to specify it on the DoesForEach or any other methods that we're adding onto that TaskOf object. So the end result is if I go back over to here and I run the new state.cake, the output is exactly the same. The operation of that script is exactly the same as it was before. It's just it's a little bit cleaner in terms of how the script is formulated, and it means that you don't have to repeat yourself in terms of knowing the type that you're wanting to operate that script on. So hopefully this is going to be useful to you. I know that some of the folks in the Cake team were excited to get this added in. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out. But for now, thank you very much.